Howdy y'all, welcome to the 8th video in this series talking about ground instructor. So in this video I'm going to be talking about the ground instructor certificate and why you should or should not get it. So this is the 8th video in the series, and if you've been watching all the videos, thank you so much for making it all the way to this 8th video. If you haven't seen videos 1 through 7, make sure you go back and watch those, and make sure to subscribe so you get notified every time I come out with a new video. Alright, so the ground instructor certificate, what is it? Well, you can teach ground lessons. Now, do you have to be a pilot to get your ground instructor certificate? No, you don't. Will you get a job as a ground instructor without being a pilot or a flight instructor? No, you won't. So why get it? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and take a step back. So you're working on your private, you get your instrument, you get your commercial pilot certificates, and then you're like, well, I'm a commercial pilot, I can get a job. But you find out nobody wants to hire you because they don't have enough flight time. So then you become a flight instructor. Well, as a flight instructor, you are allowed to teach both flight and ground lessons. So what's the purpose of the ground instructor? The ground instructor, you can only teach ground lessons, whereas the flight instructor, you can teach both flight and ground. Now, I'm a flight instructor. I'm a CFI, II, MEI. I've got my Advanced Ground Instructor certificate, my Instrument Ground Instructor certificate. So I've got all the certificates. Private, or I'm a commercial pilot, my instrument rating, and so I pretty much have all the certificates that you can. But the reason why I like having the ground instructor certificate, well, one, it's very easy to get, which I'll explain here in a minute. But also, as a professor of aviation, or if you're a flight instructor, it's whenever you go to give somebody an endorsement, typically you're going to use your flight instructor certificate, but I like reduced liability. And so whenever I give an endorsement for like a knowledge test, I like to use my ground instructor certificate for that instead of my flight instructor certificate. It is extremely hard to get your flight instructor certificate, but it's extremely easy to get your ground instructor certificate. So whenever I give somebody an endorsement for their knowledge test, I always use my ground instructor certificate, because if I screw something up, which I feel like I'm a pretty good instructor, but if I screw something up, then the FAA wants to take one of my certificates away, I'd rather hand them my ground instructor certificate, not my flight instructor certificate. So that's why you want to get your ground instructor certificate. And then plus, it's just so easy. When you're working on you have your commercial pilot certificate, you're going to work on your flight instructor certificate. One of those requirements to get your flight instructor is to take the Fundamentals of Instruction knowledge test, which is one of the requirements for the ground instructor certificate. Well, then you also have, for flight instructor, you have to take your flight instructor airplane knowledge test. Well, the advanced ground instructor knowledge test is exactly the same as the flight instructor knowledge test. That it's just like, well, take them both at the same time. You're studying hard for one of them, so go ahead and take both of them. And once you have both your advanced ground instructor knowledge test and your FOI knowledge test complete, all you have to do is fill out an application on IACRA, which I'll talk about later. But you fill out that application on IACRA, schedule an appointment with your Flight Standards District Office, and once you meet with an FAA inspector, they sign you off and you're a ground instructor. There's no check ride with a ground instructor certificate. So that's all it is. Now, the next thing I want to tell you about is the different types of ground instructors. There's 3 types. There's basic ground instructor, there's advanced ground instructor, and there's instrument ground instructor. You only want to get 2 of them, advanced ground instructor and instrument ground instructor. So the basic ground instructor, you're only allowed to teach private, sport, and recreational pilots. Now, if you've been watching this series, I haven't made a video about sport or recreational pilots. I'm actually making some videos about why not to get those. So stay tuned, subscribe so you get to watch those videos. But as a basic ground instructor, you can only teach private, sport, and recreational pilots. It's pretty much useless. Whereas the advanced ground instructor, you can teach private, sport, recreational, but then you can also teach commercial and airline transport pilot students with the advanced ground instructor. So there's really no reason to get the basic ground instructor. And then the other ground instructor certificate is the instrument ground instructor. So the only requirements to get your Instrument Ground Instructor is take the FAA knowledge test and the Instrument Ground Instructor knowledge test. And then no check ride, and that's it. And you can teach people instrument ground lessons. With the IGI test, it's exactly the same as the instrument knowledge test. So if you're watching this and you haven't even started your flight training, if you're working on your instrument rating, go and take your instrument knowledge test. And if you watch my flight instructor video, then you know that when you take your instrument knowledge test, take your instrument knowledge test, your flight instructor instrument knowledge test, but then also go and take your instrument ground instructor knowledge test. They're all the same tests. So yeah, it costs money for each test. So if that's the limiting factor on why you can't take them, okay, I understand it. But if you can afford it, take all 3 tests, and that way you can, get your instrument rating or your instrument ground instructor certificate. It's super easy to get these ground instructor certificates. They don't expire. So just, it's just it's another piece of plastic in your wallet. So I'd recommend it. Now, if all you are is an instrument ground instructor or a ground instructor, whether it's advanced ground instructor or instrument ground instructor, if you're not a flight instructor, will you get a job? No. If a flight school hires somebody with only ground instructor certificate, they must be desperate and cannot find anybody. And I know you're thinking like, man, I just want to teach aviation. Maybe you're a private pilot, and you want to just start teaching this stuff because you love aviation so much. I understand that. It's a lot of aviation's fun, teaching aviation's fun, but to be an effective teacher in aviation, you have to have the experience for it. When I was working on my flight instructor, or actually I was a commercial pilot, and I had taken the FOI knowledge test because I was working towards flight instructor. So I went ahead and did the FOI knowledge test, and I did the advanced ground instructor knowledge test when I did my flight instructor airplane knowledge test. So I was a advanced ground instructor before I was a flight instructor, and I was like, man, I wish I could find a job. And they were telling me the same thing, like, hey, unless you're a CFI, we don't want to hire you as a ground instructor. Even though I meet the legal requirements to teach the stuff, without the experience of flight instructing, you're just not going to make a great ground instructor, because students all the time have questions like, hey, what about when you're doing this? What should I do? And if all you've done is read the books, which you don't even have to read the books to become a certified ground instructor. You don't have to be a pilot to be a ground instructor. You just have to have those 2 knowledge tests. And so without that actual experience of flying a lot as a flight instructor, you're just not going to be effective in teaching people to learn. But what are things you could do? I have seen some flight schools that their students who are working towards, commercial flight instructor, that they will hire them, maybe not for money, maybe they like a few bucks, but it's a good way to participate. Maybe they'll get like a discount on flight training, but it's a good way for a student that's working on all their pilot certificates, flight instructor certificates, to contribute to help students learn. And so it's more like a peer mentor when you're a ground instructor without any other certificates. So that's a good way to do it. Or maybe you are going to teach like a college in aviation, but not towards pilot stuff, but for like other things in aviation. Yeah, that would be a good reason to get your ground instructor certificate. So I don't know, it's a certificate that you can get from the FAA that you can't really do much, and nobody wants to hire you unless you're already a flight instructor. But it is just something extra you can get, and it looks good on a resume. So hey, why not? But hey, well, this is the last video in this series. I'm going to be making a whole lot more videos, so I encourage you to watch them, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Take care.